Hello and welcome. I'm Representative Tommy Vitolo, and I'm here today with candidate for the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District, Ben Sigel. And I've known Ben for some time. He's a Brookline resident, and I'm absolutely delighted that he took some time to sit down with me, and we're going to talk about the race. And hopefully we'll get a little more in depth than some other programs have been able to get. Of course, I want to thank Brookline Interactive Group, BIG, for providing this platform for me and for these candidates to have these conversations. And let's get to it, Ben. Thanks for joining us. I want to start by asking the really straightforward question. What were you doing between birth and 2019? Tell us where you come from so we might have some sense of where you're going.
Thank you, Representative. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on your show, and Brookline Interactive as well for helping have a place where these type of shows can be on it. As a resident of Brookline since 2003, I've been able to participate in some of the shows that Brookline Interactive has done and visit their facilities. So look, I think my story of where I came from up to 2019 is so similar to the majority of the people in the 4th District. I grew up in a blue-collar, middle-class town in Braintree, a athletic competitor to Brookline, but I grew up in Braintree. My mom grew up in Puerto Rico. I'm Latino. I'd be the first Latino ever elected to Congress from Massachusetts. And my dad, he grew up third generation from Worcester. And so we were, I was born and raised in Braintree, went through the Braintree Public Schools. I was an Eagle Scout when I was younger, participated in Boys State, went off to college at Middlebury, where I was a record holder in the decathlon. I was a decathlete and pentathlete. And right after college, I actually went and worked for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Democratic Caucus, helping to promote a national Democratic agenda. That was back in 1998. And then after a few years of that, I went to law school and I went to business school. And I did both because I wanted to understand both how individuals and how businesses were thinking to solve problems. And as a lawyer, for the last 15 plus years, my job has been trying to solve business problems and individual problems using my legal mind. And so I've been enjoying that, working at several different law firms throughout the Commonwealth. Most recently, the last 9 years, I was at Mintz-Levin, where I was the National Director of all Client and Community Relations. My job was figuring out what are we doing well with our clients and continuing it, what were we doing wrong with our clients and fixing it, and deepening those relationships with our clients, while internally breaking down silos for better collaboration to provide better client services. It's actually something I think as a member of Congress we really need to do, is how to bring everyone together, break down the silos to move forward to provide better constituent services. Now, as much as I have loved being a lawyer over these 15 plus years, what really has charged me and motivated me is all the nonprofit boards I've sat on. Over the last around dozen to 15 years, I've sat on over 12 nonprofit boards and committees, mostly in the Jewish community and in the Latino community. I'm currently the president of the Hispanic National Bar Association for all of New England. I've sat on the CJP board and the American Jewish Committee board. I've sat on GAN Academy's board and the Jewish Teen Foundation of Greater Boston and the University of Haifa, and many others, helping to truly strengthen our Jewish community and our Latino community, while also helping to create real partnerships. And during this time, up until I announced my run for Congress, I've also been raising 4 wonderful, fun, and beautiful children. I have an 8th grader who's just about to enter into Brookline High School, someone who just finished 6th grade, and someone who just finished 4th grade, and my youngest, Francesca, who's going into kindergarten. And they've all been going to the Runkle School in Brookline, which has been truly wonderful. And so that takes us up in a really quick summary version up until the time that I announced my candidacy in January of this year.
So that leads right to the next question, right? So you're living this great life, you're doing all these great things, you got 4 beautiful kiddos, and you said, I'm gonna bend my career path and I'm going to run for Congress. And so that is not a small decision. I know you're a thoughtful and kind of guy who doesn't do things on a whim. So what brings you to the race? What were the issues that made you say in January, I'm going to change my career path, I'm going to take a risk, this is important to me? What brings you to the race?
Well, look, I actually had made the decision a little earlier, back in the fall, but sadly and unfortunately, my wife's mother died in a tragic car accident on the way to visit us. And so, when that happens, it was a shock and sad, and we're still sad in the morning. It really put the brakes on this campaign thinking about, because there were more important issues to deal with. So I only decided to finally move forward once we could get over some of our grieving period at that point in January. But look, I jumped into this race because, probably like so many viewers, I was sick and tired of the divisions we were seeing in this country. Tired of being divided by race and being divided by where we live and who we love and the abilities we have and the amount of money that we have. And I also was sick and tired of seeing the gap between those who have and those who have not continually to widen. And when I looked at the field, I was the 7th candidate in, I didn't see anyone talking about how do we all come together? How do we act as one strong community? Now, the issues, as you all will know, is most of the candidates, we're all pretty similar on the issues, but the approach is where we're different. And my approach has been from the beginning that we are so much stronger as a community when we are united than when we are divided. It's the entire theme of our campaign. We, the fourth, we're all in this together. That was the theme of our campaign from day one, not after COVID-19 started, not after the murder of George Floyd, because I truly believe we're only going to solve the big issues of the day if we all work together. It's why I was the first candidate to visit all 34 cities and towns in this district, even though I got in over almost 4 months after many of the other candidates. It's why I've almost visited all of those cities and towns, all 34, a second time. It's why I've attended almost 20 different rallies, protests, and vigils in at least 11 of the different cities and towns in the district. Now, I believe the strong foundation to any strong community is access to opportunities. It's what binds us all. Whether you're the wealthiest person in the district or whether you're the poorest, it's access to opportunities. Universal access to high quality, affordable healthcare, access to high quality, affordable education, access to clean air and clean water, access to affordable housing and affordable, efficient, and effective transportation. But it's also about not living in fear and not living by yourself. So that's why I'm one of the only candidates talking about passing comprehensive and compassionate immigration reform. And it's why, quite frankly, Representative, from day one, I was the only candidate talking about combating hatred, bigotry, racism, and anti-Semitism in all forms against all people. That's from day one. Now, look, if you're going to solve those issues and many others that we might discuss today, you need a leader who's a bridge builder, a unifier, a connector. You need a leader who's diverse, that understands the diverse perspectives of the community and doesn't just talk about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, but actually has been doing it every single day. And finally, you need a leader who understands the majority perspective of the majority of the district. I believe I'm that leader and that person, partly because you heard of some of how I grew up, but also because I've worked in the nonprofit world and the for-profit world and the government. You need all three sectors in order to make real positive change. Growing up in a blue-collar middle-class family is so similar, like Braintree, so similar to most of the towns. My brother lives in Franklin. My cousins grew up in Sharon. My kids went to school in Newton for a while, have been in Brookline for several years. And my dad oversaw public housing authorities and auditing them in Taunton and Fall River. So I have deep connections throughout the entire district and a perspective of this middle class coming to it, and the perspective of, quite honestly, raising 4 young kids and the balance between work and home and the burdens of childcare costs.
I know half of that burden having 2 kids, not 4. 4 is imaginable by me, but not by my wife. And therefore, we have two, and we love them dearly. So you got into the race, and you're focused on these issues. And COVID didn't happen overnight, but it went from this interesting thing happening in Italy and in China to, wow, we're going to get whacked. And society changed dramatically in the month of March. No doubt, campaigning changed dramatically. And campaigning is about getting your message out there, talking to folks, listening to folks. I imagine your plan for how you're going to run your campaign up through the election, September 1st, Tuesday, September 1st, 2020, has evolved quite a bit, starting with the month of March. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the campaign side and a little bit about policy side. How does COVID change the game for your campaign and then for what it would like to be Congressman Ben Sigel?
No, thank you for that question. Look, it first started when we first announced on January 19th. Instead of the typical candidate that goes out and just fundraises, we spent 3 weeks visiting all 34 cities and towns. So that took us to the middle of February, which means we really only had 3 weeks before COVID really started happening. And that was a short period. And we adjusted like everyone else. We made our campaign all virtual. But what we did is something that was very different than the rest of the campaigns. We decided that this is an opportunity to show people truly how we're going to legislate and how we're going to be a member of Congress. So everything we did for the next couple of months was under the guise of, can we inform, can we educate, can we support and protect the community? And so we were the first candidate to put up a COVID-19 resource page, and we translated it into Portuguese and into Spanish. Over the last couple months, we've put together 30 Facebook Live conversations with different experts and different leaders throughout the community. And again, in order to inform, educate, and support the community. We had the select board member, Raul Fernandez, talk about what it's like to help run a city or a town during COVID-19. In Brookline, we had Rabbi Hamilton from Kehillah, Israel, talk about what it's like to run a religious institution under COVID-19. We had Sam Yoon, who's on the Asian American Commission, talk about the rise in hatred against the Asian American community under COVID-19. We had several doctors, including one of your colleagues, Representative John Santiago, talk about what it's like to be on the front lines. We had the CEO of Eastern Bank, Bob Rivers, talk about banking under COVID-19. We had someone talk about mental health challenges and suicide prevention. And we also had key leaders in the Black, Asian, and African-American communities talk about how under COVID-19, systemic racism was being exposed and exacerbated even more. We also had small business owners speak. And so what we wanted to do is make sure we were there for the community, to be a resource and to help move us forward. We've been really proud of that. We think we are running the best virtual digital campaign that's out there. Now, in addition to that, we've seen a rise of a lot of more issues under COVID-19. And so our focus has been, how do we help people move forward? We need massive federal investment right now in truly small business owners. And we see a lot of them in Brookline right now who are falling through the cracks, who weren't able to even apply, be eligible for, or get some of the PPP money that was there. Because we know in Massachusetts, 99.6% of businesses are small businesses. And take even the Latino community, 91% of Latinos in business are small businesses, and they're usually one-person businesses. They have fallen through the cracks, and we need to help them. And while we now get back, hopefully with the economy starting to open up a little bit, we need to make sure they have the resources to purchase and use the PPE that we need, the personal protection equipment, including ventilators. So we need to be helpful there. Number two, as someone who has small kids, we've all seen this. We need investment in our childcare facilities and just childcare services. We've had so many people out of work for the last few months that can't afford childcare right now in order to go back to work, and they can't go back to work without childcare. We need to be helpful there, and we need to help the facilities who now have been out of work for a long time, many of which have closed, They're mom and pop businesses that didn't get the PPP money, and we need to invest in that. We also need to invest in our cities and towns like Brookline. As you know, several weeks ago, Brookline had to give pink slips to over 300 teachers. Now, many of them have already been brought back on, but we still need to make sure the education inequality gap is not widening. 10% of the students in Massachusetts right now don't have internet. 20% don't have a device. And so we need to, from the federal government, help make sure that the foundation for everyone starts the same. We also have to make sure, and I think you know this, Representative, that our undocumented immigrants, they've been on the front lines as our healthcare workers, helping with agricultural and food, and have been working in our grocery stores and pharmacies. They don't get any unemployment assistance. We need to be helpful there because it's going to cost them and our community far more down the road. And finally, we really need to make sure that all of us are working together to move this forward, right? We're gonna see more spikes. We need to continue our social distancing and work together to make sure that COVID-19 doesn't spread anymore. And I think we're starting to do that, but we need our politicians, we need our candidates, we need all of our leaders talking about this and working together so that we're not seeing what happened in Texas and in Florida and other parts in the country. It's not going to happen here.
So March was a whirlwind, and April was sort of settling into this new normal. And then George Floyd was murdered, and our society very quickly created a new normal and new sets of conversations and new expectations. And it's about policing, but it's not just about policing, right? There's a whole lot to this. You said earlier that you were campaigning on issues of race and equality from day one. And so it doesn't strike me that George Floyd's murder changed your opinion about right and wrong. But I wonder if you could shed some light about how it's changed, maybe risen some policies, or has there been some conversations that you've listened to or had that have helped refine your view or sharpen a focus, or maybe bring an idea to you that you hadn't quite realized was really ready for prime time? How has it changed your view on leadership and your vision for the future?
Look, we're all dealing with this now. We know that although it was the knee of a racist police officer who killed George Floyd, we know the knee of systemic racism has been on the throat of especially the Black community for over 400 years, from slavery to Jim Crow to segregation. And so that's partly of why I jumped into this race. I'm not just about racism against the Black community, but all communities, because hate against any one community is hate against all. And although you mentioned there are some new conversations, I think what's been happening is these conversations were taking place. There's just a lot more people taking part in the conversations right now. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Because, look, I have been to close to 20 marches, rallies, and protests in at least 11 of the different cities and towns in our district, several of which in Brookline, which have been inspiring and tremendous. And we need to seize this moment right now. We have people, for the first time ever, standing up together and speaking out together and using the collective power of their voice to want to make real change. I recently put out a full roadmap on how I think we need to eliminate racism. And I want to talk about that for a little bit. Look, we absolutely immediately need to condemn and eliminate racial profiling, police brutality, and we need to eliminate and condemn excessive use of force. But we need to create national certifications for our police and national training for our police. We also need to create national decertifications for police. We have to eliminate police immunity. We have to hold accountable those police officers, and if necessary, those departments who violate civil rights. They need to be held accountable. We need to make sure we eliminate facial recognition technology. We need to make sure that we're letting, that all police have body cams on them. These are all really important, including demilitarizing the police. And we also have to shift some of the resources and allocations that are going to police to other areas. So for instance, we don't need our police officers making overtime pay to be construction flaggers. We also know that education and engagement is the antidote to criminal justice reform, to poverty, to mental health, and to substance use disorder. So let's get the true experts who are working on those issues: social workers, community crisis teams, psychologists, educators, and let's put some of the resources that sometimes we have the police on the front line of that, where we could put some other workers. Now look, if we were to do all that, and I really hope we do, that would be wonderful, but that's still not getting to the systematic racism that we're seeing in our country. We need to eradicate it in all the different systems in our country, starting with healthcare. We know those in the Black and brown community are contracting COVID-19 at double and triple the rates of their population. Some of that as a result of the environmental injustice and racism that we're seeing. We know that the Black and brown communities are getting tested less and are getting treated less. We know that they have less personal protection equipment. We need to eradicate it. We need to pass paid family and medical leave and not be the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have that. Because we know when one person doesn't have healthcare coverage, they put themselves and their family in danger and everyone else. We need to eradicate the racism that's in our education system. I talked about a little bit before that 10% don't have internet, 20% don't have devices. We need to make sure that we need funding in our schools, and we need to diversify our teachers as well as part of that. In Massachusetts, 20% of our students are Latino. Only 3% of our teachers are. Look, we need to eradicate racism in our housing system. We know that public housing helped with segregating our communities. We need transit-oriented communities that are mixed, have affordable and market rate and subsidized housing altogether. We need to eradicate racism in our transportation system. Look, we know that it is hard in our communities of color and low-income communities to find reliant, efficient, and affordable transportation. I'll give one example: Fall River. Fall River, 20% of the residents in Fall River don't have a car. They need public transportation, yet we don't have direct high-speed rail or great busing system to get them into the hub of employment in Boston. We need to work on that. Now listen, even there, if we do all of that, and we need to, we're still not getting to the 3 truly underlying causes of racism, I believe, in this country. And I want to mention them real quickly. Number 1 is, I believe no one is born a racist, no one is born a bigot, no one is born an anti-Semite. We teach that in our society. And so we need to both unteach it and teach our youth at the earliest ages, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, that lies, stereotype, and prejudice turn into hate and, far worse, death. We need to teach cultural competency, implicit, explicit bias training, not just to our teachers, but our political leaders and business leaders. So that's number 1. Number 2, and this is partly why I got into the race, we need diverse leaders who understand the diverse perspectives of our community and who are going to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, that's not just political leaders, right? We know we need that, but that's our teachers, as the example I just gave you. But it's also making sure that our boardrooms and our executive suites of our Fortune 500 companies, our nonprofits, and the private sector are diverse, with diverse leaders understanding the diverse perspectives. Number 3 is we need the power of the vote. We need to support and protect all Americans in voting, especially those who've been historically disenfranchised, like in the Black and brown communities. We need to eliminate partisan gerrymandering. We need to eliminate all barriers to early voting. We need to eliminate any barriers to voting. We need automatic voter registration. We need to eliminate voting purging rolls. These are just a few of the things we need to really focus on. And 3 plus 1 to add in, because we're right in this time right now, is the census. The biggest, most inclusive civil activity in this country which we're all in the middle of now. And the last figures I saw was only around 65% of Massachusetts had filled out their census forms. We need to make sure that all communities are being counted and not undercounted, because we know that equates to equal representation and equal access to both government and private funds. So if you haven't filled out your census questionnaire, please do that online, because it really is going to help Brookline. It's going to help your smaller communities. It's going to help Massachusetts decide where schools go, where roads go, where hospitals go, how much resources we get from the federal government in response to natural disasters. These are all really important to us. So I think those are the 3+ reasons that we really need to get underneath if we're going to eliminate racism in this country.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I know you have, as both a Latino man and a Jewish man, you have some perspectives that you're bringing to this conversation that really are important. And I'm glad you mentioned elections. For folks who don't know, the House and Senate did come to a bill to revise the September and November election policies. And just very quickly, you absolutely can vote by mail for the September 1st primary and for the November 3rd general. And you absolutely can vote in person for the September 1st primary and the November 3rd general. I encourage you to vote by mail if you can. I think that it's a little bit safer and a little bit easier. But most important, get out there and vote. Vote in the primary, vote in the general. Without participation from everyone, we're not going to get the best outcomes from our elected leaders. Ben, we've only got a minute left, so I want you to, if you could, talk for a little bit, just a minute, about what it means to be an ally in all of this, and how viewers, wherever they are on the political spectrum, wherever they are in their life's path, how folks can be better allies on issues that are meaningful to our communities.
Thank you. I think that's such a wonderful question and very timely, Representative Vitolo, because just yesterday I sat on a panel with the Boston Bar Association on how to be an effective ally. Look, we hear the terms mentor and sponsor and ally. Let's just separate that out. You know, a mentor is someone who gives you advice that helps you in a specific field or your organization or place of business. It's very particular. A sponsor is someone who's going to advocate on your behalf within that industry or that organization or place of employment. But an ally is someone who's going to be around you both as a sponsor, as a mentor, but around you always on who you are as your whole person, not just who you are working as an employee. And it's really important, right? Allies are friends, not just in good times or in bad times, but they're there for you always. And it starts with listening to what's going on. And that's why I encourage people in a very safe way to listen to your neighbors in these last 3 weeks at these vigils and rallies, and listen to what their thoughts are and their perspectives and their needs, right? An ally is someone who's not only going to look at themselves and say, look, I may not be part of that marginalized group, but I'm going to make a concerted effort at learning about them. You know, Black History Month and Latino Heritage Month shouldn't just be 1 month of us studying Black history and Latino history. It needs to be about all the time. We need to understand who are these groups that are being marginalized, but also these groups carry every day the burden of their own identities. And an ally is someone who truly steps up and says, I want to help try to carry some of that burden with you. I'm there side by side with you. That doesn't mean you 100% understand what they're going through, but it means you're willing to try to learn and be there with them. You know, I always say an ally is a great example is many times people look at me because I have lighter skin and say, oh, you're not Latino, you don't look Latino, or you don't have a Latino last name. And the best allies are the people who are next to me that say, well, what does a Latino look like? Why are we judging a book by its cover, right? And if my last name, my mom's maiden name was Fonseca, we wouldn't even have these conversations. And so an ally is always there trying to lift you up, trying to advocate for you, trying to advise you, but most importantly, trying to understand what you're going through and help carry some of that burden.
Ben, thank you for taking the time to talk with me and our viewers on Brookline Interactive. I'm delighted that you're in the race. I'm delighted that you're talking about these issues. And I'm glad that you were able to spend some time with us. Folks, my name is Representative Tommy Vitolo. Thank you for watching Brookline Interactive, and thank you, Ben Sigel, for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you, Representative Vitolo.